What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today is Best Served Podcast 392. We're going to be talking to Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 on employee retention using labor management. You know how important the employee experience is to myself, to Best Served. It is literally why we do what we do. We're here to empower and educate the future leaders. We want to amplify the worth and work of those who feed their community. And we're really taking kind of the experience side of it from our restaurant backgrounds, as well as kind of just the storytelling side, to kind of really illuminate what it means to be a part of this industry and the challenges we've had in the past. What I really like about Jim and his group is they have a really, really analytical look at it as well, and bring those two things together, because we've looked at enough spreadsheets and numbers for long enough. We kind of fucked them up and didn't understand the impact that it had on actual humans. So that balancing act is something that we really need to understand, and I want to bring Jim in to talk about it. So no further ado, Jim, let's get into this. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you too, Jensen.
All right. Well, we got a lot of work to do on this front of, understanding the numbers, because we've never been good at understanding the numbers. Then when we get good enough at understanding the numbers, we manipulate them and force them upon ourselves and our people. And then we wonder why we have, 75% turnover rates annualized in the restaurant industry, which the numbers are like over 120% now. So let's just say 75%. The churn rate is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The amount of stress, the amount of people that say throw their hands up and leave the industry, all of these things we know, we just haven't wanted to pay attention to it. So you have something you talk about, employee retention is the new cool. Let's start with that, because I think understanding the mindset shift that needs to happen is first. So let's start there, and then let's hit them over the head with some numbers, some facts, and give them a couple of actionable ways to find their way out of it.
Yeah, retention is the new cool. I mean, that's kind of words to live by for us, because at the end of the day, like you said, turnover. I heard a stat the other day that was like 68% in full service restaurants. I think that is so far from accurate. I think it's way higher than that.
Yeah.
And think about any other industry in the world. If they had 100% turnover every year, that'd be like the number one focus. They'd stop everything. But
everything.
For some reason, us in restaurants, we sort of just assume that it's okay and keep trying to work harder. So yeah, retention is the new cool is kind of our sort of slogan. It's kind of become something that's stuck, and we're just trying to help to encourage the industry to think about the fact that you actually don't need more interviews. You need better retention. Yep. You don't need more applicants if you don't lose people.
Yeah. But there's this thing that we perpetuate. They're like, well, they don't stick around that long. Well, I'm not going to put in that much effort because they might not show up for an interview. Well, it's all these excuses. And you're right. If that's what you believe and that's what you map towards, you will be 100% right. You will achieve that. But I think it's, again, flipping the narrative. And if you own a business, it's going to be your responsibility to flip that narrative. Yeah. Can't point the finger and say, well, kids are lazy these days, or this is just the way it is. Like, you have to do something different. So I want to then kind of give the kind of statement of where your focus is at Benchmark 60. You're really focused on labor management and workload management specifically. Any of the sports fans out there, you hear about those kind of things in sports a lot. They're trying to manage their workload to make sure that they can make the playoffs, right? That they can achieve their goals. So what is the trick here with labor management? What aren't we understanding?
Well, it's there's so many, and you and I have had some conversation about this before, right? There are so many variables that go into that metric that our industry has always placed kind of on a pedestal as the most important thing to manage, right? Mm. It's the first thing that gets talked about every morning. It's the last thing that gets talked about, every night. It gets talked about in pre-shift. I mean, even the word cut is like a general part of our vocabulary, right? How many times have you said that to an employee when you're in management? You're cut. We've constantly taken this approach of top line revenue is everything, and cut as hard as you can to try to make sure there's money at the end of the day. And there's so many variables, from average employee wage, average customer spend, which you really can't control very much, what the weather's doing, what day of the week it is, what month of the year it is, all these different things that go into and factor into what that labor cost percentage is going to end up like. And I'm telling you, the managers in charge, the case studies we've done show that it's 10% maybe 10% of the time, a manager or a chef on duty actually hits their target on any given day.
So
Sometimes
let's cover on that for a second. So you're saying I schedule a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, and I think I know my projections. We're so bad at projections. We're so reactionary, Jim. And that's a strength, like being able to ebb and flow in the moment, making sure that you are very responsive to the guest's needs. Absolutely is a strength. Yet we stay in that mindset and we don't forward think. So our projections are probably off, both on the revenue sales side as well as the labor needs side. And then we can't reconcile those in the moment or forward thinking. So you're saying I'm scheduling for a week. I'm saying that I'm going to have a $70,000 in sales. I end up actually having 64.5, and then I'm not able to adjust my labor accordingly. And so I am off every day and cumulatively for the week. That's what you're saying. 10% is our accuracy. That's pretty rough.
It's pretty rough. So if you think about it, and you just commented on this, of the managers in restaurants that we work with, it's probably, I mean, I don't have an exact stat on this, but if I had to make an educated guess, it's probably 75 to 80% of the managers we deal with schedule based on revenue. If they don't schedule based on revenue, they schedule based on day of the week. So they're writing a Monday schedule or a Friday schedule. They're writing a $5,000 schedule or a, depending how big the restaurant is, a $20,000 schedule, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a $2,000 schedule. But let me walk you through this for a second. If I said, okay, Jensen, you have a little cafe, has 50 seats, you own it. We know we have a crystal ball, and it's going to tell us that on Monday, you're going to serve 50 customers. On Tuesday, you're going to serve 100 customers. And on Wednesday, you're going to serve 200 customers. Okay. Monday, you're probably going to think, I need one person to help me, right? Maybe someone to cook some food. I can serve 50 customers from open to close by myself, right? Over a 10-hour window. But if you look at Tuesday and go 100 customers, you're going to go, okay, 100, that's double. I need maybe 2 or 3 people to help me. On Wednesday, we're going to serve 200 customers. Well, now you need probably a whole team of people, to make sure that things go properly. Because if you don't schedule based on the number of people you're serving, a 200-person service gets a lot more stressful than a 50-person service does, right? Now, what if I told you that on Monday, your 50 customers are going to spend $100 each?
Yeah, there it is.
And on Wednesday, every one of those 200 customers that comes in is going to spend nothing. They're just having water. Now you've got good sales happening. You've got 5,000 in sales happening on Monday. You've got 0 in sales happening on Wednesday. But if you schedule for 0 sales, what happens to the service level? What happens to the employee experience? What happens to your experience as a manager? It's stressful. It's too much workload. And really, the customer doesn't want to come back, and neither do the staff.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously that is like polar opposites. That's not going to be the reality of what happens. But in the gray, in the middle, there is the difference in this business when you do have, slim margins. And we use these challenges of the business model, which need to be addressed as well. We won't get into that today. Like we use that as an excuse not to understand what's actually happening. The game you're actually playing at any given time, I think, is very nuanced. And we have these generalities that we aren't able to drill down on, don't want to look at it because sometimes it's too painful. Because you had a large number of covers, you were understaffed. It was a horrible experience for everybody. Half those guests aren't coming back. You didn't hit the check average because people weren't able to sell. You had high loss because of returned items, because of wasted, spent dishes, things like that. So huge impacts with that. Let's talk about the workload management, right? So Benchmark 60, you all are basically saying we need to understand labor management, the numbers, the moving pieces that you kind of just mentioned, but also the human impact, which is hard to measure. So how are you thinking about kind of the workload management, the stress that impact is having on the actual employees? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the 2 core strategies that we use to help connect the employee experience and the retention side of things to the business model are, one, we use a strategy that measures overall business productivity in a restaurant environment. So we can help to determine, there's a sort of a process that we go through that will help to determine exactly what level of overall productivity the business needs to achieve in order to get to the profit level that it's looking for. So, I mean, that's a different side of it. But if you think about how productive the business is, there's a threshold where the business can only be so productive or get so much done before there's a tipping point where all of a sudden it turns into workload management, where I have to now, as an employee, work too hard in order to get the result that we're looking to get. Whether that result is serve my customers properly, take quick orders, cook food in the right amount of time at the right quality level, whatever that job might be, there's a threshold that we have to make sure we're aware of. And again, if we go past that threshold, it becomes workload management, and there's direct connection to retention, turnover, mental health, all of these things, because it starts to cause stress and anxiety for people, customers included.
And so, this is huge. This is a mindset shift that is really challenging because we have such a tough guy, tough gal mentality in this industry. Mm-hmm. We will run through that fucking wall, Jim, again and again and again until the job is done, right? We perpetuate tropes like that every day, all day. It's like this badge of honor that we hold. That's really hard to let go of. But that's Jim, that's what we're working the hardest on. This is why I like talking to you, because we're trying to kind of meet in the middle, right? We have a lot of the same ethos, so we're trying to attack them from slightly different angles and then overlapping angles. So I think it's important. We have to stop killing ourselves for what eventually is a goal that is not achieved because we didn't even understand the goal in the game that we were playing. So I want to take just a couple of minutes as we wrap here. Hit us with some of the numbers. Employee retention sounds fine. Turnover rates are what they are. But like, give us a breakdown. What does it cost to lose people? Or on the flip side, if you look at that way, what is the value of retaining people? Can you give us a little perspective on the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, we typically use and it's going up because of what's happening with wages across, depending on the market. But, the most of the information that we find is it's somewhere in the $2,000 range to hire an hourly employee in a restaurant on average right now. So if you're a restaurant and you've got 50 staff and you're turning over 100% every year, I mean, that's 50 people times 2,000, it's $100,000 a year in cost just in turnover, right? So, there's a quick, if we have enough time, I'll share a quick little case study we did on how to connect some of this information to what's happening with turnover and how to improve it. So we did a case study with a group that had 12 restaurants, and they were finding that not every restaurant was seeing an increase in average customer spend and an increase in customer count versus if we were looking at 2021 versus 2019. Okay, so they're double-digit increase in revenue, which lots of restaurants are finding right now, right? However, not one location across the board, 12 restaurants, could actually hit their labor targets. And they're all going, what's going on? We've got more revenue to play with. We've got more customers to play with. What's happening? So we applied this metric around workload and productivity to look at what was actually happening from a data perspective in the restaurant, and found that every restaurant across the company, 12 locations, was on average 30% less productive in 2021 than they were in 2019. So we connected that from a people perspective to the HR department, and found that in 2019, the average employee had worked for that company for close to a year and a half. Okay, which is not bad for a restaurant, right? In terms of how we usually look at it. But in 2021, that same employee had worked for that company for less than 4 months. So what that told us was that the average employee in that company couldn't handle as much workload as they could in 2019 because they just weren't as experienced. They didn't have as much training. They just weren't as exposed to what was happening in the business. So in order to get the same labor cost target achieved in 2021 versus 2019, there was only one way that the managers could accomplish that. And that was to run short-staffed on purpose.
Right.
If they didn't realize that they needed to lower the workload and invest in their people to protect that experience, they're going to quit.
Yep, that's brutal. And I want to make sure anybody and everyone listening to this, it's important to recognize the first instinct I think a lot of people that are so embedded in the industry are gonna have is like, yeah, they're not as productive because they're lazy, they're entitled, they're not as good, all these things. The reality is this has been happening, and it's been on this path for so long that so many of us have burnt out. And the reality is, like, the churn rate is just too high. You can't burn through young, dumb 20-year-old kids for generations and expect that this is going to be a sustainable business model. And it's not the fault of kids these days, quote unquote. They are the best chance we have for success. We have to invest in them, listen to them, put them in an opportunity to succeed, and working them and grinding them to the bone. They're smarter than we are. They're not going to take that. They want to work at a place with purpose and meaning and value. And that's the deal. So we need to understand that, Jim. And I appreciate you taking that data perspective and bringing it to light, because it's important for our team, even the work that we're doing, to understand that. So thank you for that. And everyone, you're going to hear a lot more from Jim and Benchmark 60. As always, get into the comments and make sure and check out the link of the article, 6 Questions with Jim Taylor, where you break down some more really, really valuable and actionable items for us to take into perspective. So, Jim, appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Cheers. All right, everyone, that is it for this episode. Once again, so this was Best Served Podcast 392. Jim Taylor, Benchmark 60, on restaurant employee retention and really thinking about labor management. Retention is the new cool. I'm into it. I'm getting the shirt. He sent me the shirt. I'll wear it on the show. Retention is the new cool. Get into it. That's it. Appreciate you all. Cheers.